Chapter 5, How to Build Great Campaigns. When copywriters, art directors, and television producers come to work in our agency, they are herded into a conference room and subjected to my magic lantern, which tells them how to write headlines and body copy, how to illustrate advertisements, how to construct television commercials, and how to select the basic promise for their campaigns. The rules I postulate do not represent my personal opinions. They are the quintessence of what I have learned from research. The recruits react to my lecture in different ways. Some find comfort and security under the command of a chief who seems to know what he is talking about. Some are uneasy at the prospect of working within such rigid disciplines. Surely, they say, these rules and regulations must result in dull advertising. Not so far, I reply. And I go on to preach the importance of discipline in art. Shakespeare wrote his sonnets within a strict discipline, 14 lines of iambic pentameter, rhyming in 3 quatrains and a couplet. Were his sonnets dull? Mozart wrote his sonatas within an equally rigid discipline: exposition, development, and recapitulation. Were they dull? This argument disarms most of the highbrows. I go on to promise them that if they will subscribe to my principles, they will soon be producing good advertisements. What is a good advertisement? There are 3 schools of thought. The cynics hold that a good advertisement is an advertisement with a client's okay on it. Another school accepts Raymond Rubikam's definition: the best identification of a great advertisement is that its public is not only strongly sold by it, but that both the public and the advertising world remember it for a long time as an admirable piece of work. I have produced my share of advertisements which have been remembered by the advertising world as admirable pieces of work. But I belong to the third school, which holds that a good advertisement is one which sells the product without drawing attention to itself. It should rivet the reader's attention on the product. Instead of saying, "What a clever advertisement," the reader says, "I never knew that before. I must try this product." It is the professional duty of the advertising agent to conceal his artifice. When Aeschines spoke, they said, "How well he speaks." But when Demosthenes spoke, they said, "Let us march against Philip." I'm for Demosthenes. If my new recruits boggle at this stern definition of good advertising, I invite them to return to their previous incarnations, there to flounder in silliness and ignorance. My next step is to tell them that I will not allow them to use the word creative to describe the functions they are to perform in our agency. The even more fashionable word creativity is not in the 12-volume Oxford Dictionary. It reminds Leo Burnett of a saying of Bernard Berenson to the effect that the only thing the Etruscans added to the art of the Greeks was the originality of incompetence. Fairfax Cohn would like to blot the word creativity out of our lives. Ed Cox thinks that there are no creative or non-creative copywriters, only good ad makers and bad. Bear in mind that Burnett, Cohn, and Cox are among the most creative men in the advertising business. How did we get along 20 years ago before creativity entered the lexicon of advertising? I am ashamed to say that I sometimes use it myself, even as I write these pages. In this chapter, I will expose to the reader what he would see in my magic lantern on the day he came to work for Ogilvy, Benson, and Mather. The research on which it is based derives from 5 principal sources. First, from the experience of mail-order advertisers. This elite corps, represented by such masters as Harry Sherman of the Book of the Month Club, Vic Schwab, and John Capples, knows more about the realities of advertising than anybody else. They are in a position to measure the results of every advertisement they write, because their view is not obscured by those complex channels of distribution which make it impossible for most manufacturers to dissect out the results of their advertising from all the other factors in their marketing mix. The mail-order advertiser has no retailers to shrink and expand their inventories, to push his product, or to hide it under the counter. He must rely on his advertisements to do the entire selling job. Either the reader clips the coupon, or he doesn't. A few days after his advertisement appears, the mail-order writer knows whether it is profitable or not. For 27 years, I have kept my eyes riveted on what mail-order advertisers do in their advertisements. And from this observation, I have crystallized some general principles which can be applied, I believe, to all kinds of advertising. The second most valuable source of information as to what makes some techniques succeed and others fail is the experience of department stores. The day after they run an advertisement, they can count the sales it has produced. That is why I am so attentive to the advertising practices of Sears Roebuck, who are the most knowing of all retailers. The third source of data on which my magic lantern depends is the research done by Gallup, Starch, Clark Hooper, and Harold Rudolph on the factors which make people read advertisements and, in the case of Dr. Gallup, the factors which make people remember what they read. On the whole, their findings endorse the experience of the mail-order fraternity. More is known about consumer reactions to advertising in newspapers and magazines than consumer reactions to television commercials. Because serious research into television, my fourth source, was not started until 10 years ago. However, Dr. Gallup and others have already produced a body of knowledge about television advertising, which is sufficient to emancipate us from total reliance on guesswork. When it comes to radio commercials, there is little or no research available from any source. Radio was made obsolete by television before anybody had learned to use it scientifically, but it is now recovered to the point where it may be described as the Cinderella of advertising media. It is time for the researchers to tackle it. My last source is less scientific. I am an inveterate brain picker, and the most rewarding brains I have picked are the brains of my predecessors and my competitors. I have learned much from studying the successful campaigns of Raymond Rubicam, Jim Young, and George Cecil. Here, then, are my recipes for cooking up the kind of advertising campaigns which make the cash register ring. 11 commandments which you must obey if you work at my agency. 1. What you say is more important than how you say it. Once upon a time, I was riding on the top of a Fifth Avenue bus when I heard a mythical housewife say to another, "Molly, my dear, I would have bought that new brand of toilet soap if only they hadn't set the body copy in 10-point Garamond." Don't you believe it? What really decides consumers to buy or not to buy is the content of your advertising, not its form. Your most important job is to decide what you are going to say about your product, what benefit you are going to promise. 200 years ago, Dr. Johnson said, "Promise, large promise, is the soul of an advertisement." When he auctioned off the contents of the Anchor Brewery, he made the following promise: "We are not here to sell boilers and vats, but the potentiality of growing rich beyond the dreams of avarice." The selection of the right promise is so vitally important that you should never rely on guesswork to decide it. At Ogilvy, Benson, and Mather, we use 5 research techniques to find out which is the most powerful. One technique is to distribute batches of the product to matched samples of consumers, each batch bearing a different promise on the package. Then we compare the percentages of consumers in each sample who send us a repeat order. Another technique is to show consumers cards on which we have printed various promises, asking them to select the one which would be most likely to make them buy the product. Here are the results of one such test, starting from the most liked going down. Face cream. Cleans deep into pores. Prevents dryness. Is a complete beauty treatment. Recommended by skin doctors. Makes skin look younger. Prevents makeup caking. Contains estrogenic hormones. Pasteurized for purity. Prevents skin from aging. Smooths out wrinkles. From this voting came one of Helena Rubinstein's most successful face creams. We christened it Deep Cleanser, thus building the winning promise into the name of the product. Another technique is to prepare a series of advertisements, each built around a different promise. We then mail the advertisements to matched samples and count the number of orders procured by each promise. Another technique is to run pairs of advertisements in the same position in the same issue of a newspaper, with an offer of a sample buried in the copy. We use this artful dodge to select the strongest promise for Dove Toilet Bar. Creams your skin. While you wash, pulled 63% more orders than the next best promise, and it has been the fulcrum of every Dove advertisement that has ever run. This marvelous product made a profit at the end of its first year, a rare feat in the marketing world of today. Finally, we have developed a technique for selecting basic promises which is so valuable that my partners forbid me to reveal it. They remind me of that selfish family of 18th century obstetricians who made a fortune by delivering more live babies than any of their competitors. They kept their secret for 3 generations. It was not until an enterprising medical student climbed up and peeked through the window of their surgery that the design of their forceps was revealed to the world. 2. Unless your campaign is built around a great idea, it will flop. It isn't every client who can recognize a great idea when he sees it. I remember presenting a truly brilliant idea to a client who said, "Mr. Ogilvy, you have here the mucus of a good idea. When I started writing advertisements, I was determined to blaze new trails, to make every one of my campaigns the most successful in the history of the industry concerned. I have not always failed." 3. Give the facts. Very few advertisements contain enough factual information to sell the product. There is a ludicrous tradition among copywriters that consumers aren't interested in facts. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Study the copy in the Sears Roebuck catalog. It sells $1 billion worth of merchandise every year by giving facts. In my Rolls-Royce advertisements, I gave nothing but facts. No adjectives, no gracious living. The consumer isn't a moron. She is your wife. You insult her intelligence if you assume that a mere slogan and a few vapid adjectives will persuade her to buy anything. She wants all the information you can give her. Competing brands are becoming more and more alike. The men who make them have access to the same scientific journals. They use the same production techniques, and they are guided by the same research. When faced with the inconvenient fact that their brand is about the same as several others, most copywriters conclude that there is no point in telling the consumer what is common to all brands. So they confine themselves to some trivial point of difference. I hope that they will continue to make this mistake because it enables us to preempt the truth for our clients. When we advertise Shell, we give the consumer facts, many of which other gasoline marketers could give, but don't. When we advertise KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, we tell travelers about the safety precautions which all airlines take, but fail to mention in their advertisements. When I was a door-to-door salesman, I discovered that the more information I gave about my product, the more I sold. Claude Hopkins made the same discovery about advertising 50 years ago, but most modern copywriters find it easier to write short, lazy advertisements. Collecting facts is hard work. Facts is hard. 4. You cannot bore people into buying. The average family is now exposed to more than 1,500 advertisements a day. No wonder they have acquired a talent for skipping the advertisements in newspapers and magazines and going to the bathroom during television commercials. The average woman now reads only 4 of the advertisements which appear in the average magazine. She glances at more, but one glance is enough to tell her that the advertisement is too boring to read. Competition for the consumer's attention is becoming more ferocious every year. She is being bombarded by $1 billion worth of advertising a month. 30,000 brand names are competing for a place in her memory. If you want your voice to be heard above this ear-splitting barrage, your voice must be unique. It is our business to make our clients' voices heard above the crowd. We make advertisements that people want to read. You can't save souls in an empty church. If you will embrace our rules, you will be able to reach more readers per dollar. I once asked Sir Hugh Rigby, Sergeant Surgeon to King George V, "What makes a great surgeon?" Sir Hugh replied, "There isn't much to choose between surgeons and manual dexterity. What distinguishes the great surgeon is that he knows more than other surgeons." It is the same with advertising agents. The good ones know their craft. 5. Be well-mannered, but don't clown. People don't buy from bad-mannered salesmen, and research has shown that they don't buy from bad-mannered advertisements. It is easier to sell people with a friendly handshake than by hitting them over the head with a hammer. You should try to charm the consumer into buying your product. This doesn't mean that your advertisements should be cute or comic. People don't buy from clowns. When the housewife fills her shopping basket, she is in a fairly serious frame of mind. 6. Make your advertising contemporary. The young housewife of 1963 was born after President Roosevelt died. She is living in a new world. At the age of 51, I am finding it increasingly difficult to tune in on the young married couples who are starting out in life. That is why most of the copywriters at our agency are so young. They understand the psychology of young consumers better than I do. 7. Committees can criticize advertisements, but they cannot write them. A lot of advertisements and television commercials look like the minutes of a committee meeting, and that is what they are. Advertising seems to sell most when it is written by a solitary individual. He must study the product, the research, and the precedents. Then he must shut the door of his office and write the advertisement. The best advertisement I ever wrote went through 17 drafts and built a business. 8. If you are lucky enough to write a good advertisement, repeat it until it stops pulling. Scores of good advertisements have been discarded before they lost their potency, largely because their sponsors got sick of seeing them. Sterling Getchell's famous advertisement for Plymouth, look at all three, appeared only once and was succeeded by a series of inferior variations which were quickly forgotten. But the Sherwin-Cody School of English ran the same advertisement. Do you make these mistakes in English? For 42 years, changing only the typeface and the color of Mr. Cody's beard. You aren't advertising to a standing army. You are advertising to a moving parade. 3 million consumers get married every year. The advertisement which sold a refrigerator to those who got married last year will probably be just as successful with those who get married next year. 1,700,000 consumers die every year, and 4 million of new ones are born. They enter the market and they depart from it. An advertisement is like a radar sweep, constantly hunting new prospects as they come into the market. Get a good radar and keep it sweeping. 9. Never write an advertisement which you wouldn't want your own family to read. You wouldn't tell lies to your own wife. Don't tell them to mine. Do as you would be done by. If you tell lies about a product, you will be found out, either by the government, which will prosecute you, or by the consumer who will punish you by not buying your product a second time. Good products can be sold by honest advertising. If you don't think the product is good, you have no business to be advertising it. If you tell lies or weasel, you do your client a disservice, you increase your load of guilt, and you fan the flames of public resentment against the whole business of advertising. 10. The image and the brand. Every advertisement should be thought of as a contribution to the complex symbol, which is the brand image. If you take that long view, a great many day-to-day problems solve themselves. How do you decide what kind of image to build? There is no short answer. Research cannot help you much here. You have actually got to use judgment. I notice increasing reluctance on the part of marketing executives to use judgment. They are coming to rely too much on research, and they use it as a drunkard uses a lamppost for support rather than for illumination. Most manufacturers are reluctant to accept any limitation on the image of their brand. They want it to be all things to all people. They want their brand to be a male brand and a female brand, an upper crust brand and a plebeian brand. They generally end up with a brand which has no personality of any kind, a wishy-washy neuter. No capon ever rules the roost. 95% of all the campaigns now in circulation are being created without any reference to such long-term considerations. They are being created ad hoc. Hence, the lack of any consistent image from one year to another. What a miracle it is when a manufacturer manages to sustain a coherent style in his advertising over a period of years. Think of all the forces that work to change it. The advertising managers come and go. The copywriters come and go. Even the agencies come and go. It takes uncommon guts to stick to one style in the face of all the pressures to come up with something new every 6 months. It is tragically easy to be stampeded into change, but golden rewards await the advertiser who has the brains to create a coherent image and the stability to stick with it over a long period. As examples, I cite Campbell's Soup, Ivory Soap, Esso, Betty Crocker, and Guinness Stout in England. The men who have been responsible for the advertising of these hardy perennials have understood that every advertisement, every radio program, every TV commercial is not a one-time shot, but a long-term investment in the total personality of their brands. They have presented a consistent image to the world and grown rich in the process. During the last few years, the researchers have been able to tell us what image old brands have acquired in the public mind. Some manufacturers have been sobered to learn that their image has serious flaws, which have been hurting their sales. They then ask their advertising agency to set about changing the image. This is one of the most difficult operations we are ever called upon to perform, because the faulty image has been built up over a period of many years. It is the result of many different factors: advertising, pricing, the name of the product, its packaging, the kind of television shows it has sponsored, the length of time it has been on the market, and so on. Most of the manufacturers who find it expedient to change the image of their brand want it changed upward. Often it has acquired a bargain basement image, a useful asset in rhymes of economic scarcity, but a grave embarrassment in boom days when the majority of consumers are on their way up the social ladder. It isn't easy to perform a facelifting operation on an old bargain basement brand. In many cases, it would be easier to start again with a fresh new brand. The greater the similarity between brands, the less part reason plays in brand selection. There isn't any significant difference between the various brands of whiskey or cigarettes or beer. They are all about the same, and so are the cake mixes and the detergents and the margarines. The manufacturer who dedicates his advertising to building the most sharply defined personality for his brand will get the largest share of the market at the highest profit. By the same token, the manufacturers who will find themselves up the creek are those short-sighted opportunists who siphon off their advertising funds for promotions. Year after year, I find myself warning my clients about what will happen to their brands if they spend so much on promotions that there is no money left for advertising. Price-off deals and other such hypodermics find favor with sales managers, but their effect is ephemeral, and they can be habit-forming. Says Bev Murphy, who invented Art Nielsen's technique for measuring consumer purchases and went on to become president of Campbell's Soup Company. Sales are a function of product value and advertising. Promotions cannot produce more than a temporary kink in the sales curve. Jerry Lambert never used promotions for Listerine. He knew that kinks in a sales curve make it impossible to read out the results of advertising. A steady diet of price-off promotions lowers the esteem in which the consumer holds the product. Can anything which is always sold at a discount be desirable? Plan your campaign for years ahead, on the assumption that your clients intend to stay in business forever. Build sharply defined personalities for their brands and stick to those personalities, year after year. It is the total personality of a brand, rather than any trivial product difference, which decides its ultimate position in the market. 11. Don't be a copycat. Rudyard Kipling wrote a long poem about a self-made shipping tycoon called Sir Anthony Gloster. On his deathbed, the old man reviews the course of his life for the benefit of his son and refers contemptuously to his competitors. They copied all they could follow, but they couldn't copy my mind, and I left them sweating and stealing, a year and a half behind. If you ever have the good fortune to create a great advertising campaign, you will soon see another agency steal it. This is irritating, but don't let it worry you. Nobody has ever built a brand by imitating somebody else's advertising. Imitation may be the sincerest form of plagiarism, but it is also the mark of an inferior person. These, then, are the general principles I inculcate in our new recruits. When I recently invited a group of them who had completed their first year with us to compare Ogilvy, Benson, and Mather with their previous agencies, I was agreeably surprised by the number who fastened on the fact that we have a more clearly defined dogma. Here is what one of them wrote. Ogilvy, Benson, and Mather has a consistent point of view, a corporate opinion of what constitutes good advertising. My previous agency has none, and consequently is rudderless. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental advertising books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and marketing-related content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.